Streamline FHIR implementations, reducing the timeline from years to mere weeks, by effortlessly integrating HL7, JSON, and healthcare systems such as EMR and EHR and RDBMS formats into FHIR. This is achieved through an automated graphical mapper and FHIR JSON bundle creation, dramatically shortening the implementation duration from over a year to just a few weeks or months. As we initiate access to the Beyond-FHIR application, the user is prompted to enter their user ID and password, followed by a two-factor authentication step for enhanced security. Within this context, we are examining healthcare data stored in an RDBMS data source dedicated to healthcare information storage. Beyond-FHIR also manages the processing of HL7 and JSON input resources into the FHIR repository. This data is destined for integration into a fast healthcare interoperability resource, FHIR, repository, which we will refer to as the FHIR FHIR repository. The empty FHIR FHIR repository will serve as the destination for our source information, featuring a specialized schema designed to accommodate FHIR stored data. Following this, we proceed to configure the necessary parameters to facilitate the integration of healthcare information from the source to the FHIR FHIR healthcare repository. Once the source information is configured, the Beyond-FHIR mapping interface is invoked to securely and accurately map the input source information into the new FHIR FHIR healthcare repository. By clicking on the Input Database table icon, users can access and view the tables within the source database that are to be mapped into the FHIR FHIR repository. Given the potential multitude of input tables and columns, the application permits users to enter partial or complete table names to facilitate the selection of columns for migration into the new FHIR FHIR repository. Users then begin selecting the columns containing the data they wish to migrate to the FHIR FHIR repository. In cases where input columns have relationships with others, the interface automates the establishment of these correlations. We request the creation of FHIR bundles to be inserted into the FHIR FHIR repository, as mandated. Additionally, it has been decided to securely encrypt the migrated healthcare data, as most of it falls under HIPAA, personal healthcare information, subject to strict regulations regarding privacy and security. While version 4 and version 5 of FHIR offer over 40,000 columns and 150 resources for population, not all companies will require all of these resources for migration. However, there are minimum requirements that must be fulfilled to construct an accurate and successful FHIR FHIR repository. For backup and querying purposes, the transformed data is optionally stored in JSON bundle format for ingestion into the FHIR FHIR repository in Snowflake. This can also be optionally stored in Google's BigQuery, MongoDB, or most other RDBMS repositories. Once the process is submitted and completed, we will review the results. Now, let's move on to the key parameters necessary to initiate the actual migration of data into the FHIR FHIR repository. Initially, we establish a connection to the FHIR repository based on our column selections from the input source. We request the creation of FHIR bundles to be inserted into the FHIR FHIR repository, as mandated. Additionally, it has been decided to securely encrypt the migrated healthcare data, as most of it falls under HIPAA, personal healthcare information, subject to strict regulations regarding privacy and security. For backup and querying purposes, the transformed data is optionally stored in JSON bundle format for ingestion into the FHIR FHIR repository in Snowflake. This can also be optionally stored in Google's BigQuery, MongoDB, or most other RDBMS repositories. Once the process is submitted and completed, we will review the results. We are providing all the essential details required for the migration of JSON data in FHIR format into the Snowflake Data Warehouse repository. The user does not need to make any additional efforts for this data to be loaded into the Snowflake repository or any other targeted BDR repository. With the process completed, we are now examining some of the data stored in the FHIR FHIR repository. Firstly, we observe the JSON information in the version table blog column of FHIR, securely encrypted. Similarly, other information in the newly created FHIR repository is also securely encrypted. BDR provides the essential APIs required to decrypt the data stored in FHIR as necessary. As previously configured, JSON bundled information is stored in a Snowflake repository, where we can see that the FHIR data is also securely encrypted by FHIR for backup and analytics purposes. We are currently displaying the majority of the primary FHIR tables that contain personal health information. As observed, all the personal health information data that requires encryption has indeed been encrypted. It's important to note that FHIR lacks the capability to perform encryption and decryption on its stored data, hindering the straightforward creation of e-commerce sites or back-end processes that need to interact with encrypted FHIR data. As previously configured, JSON bundled information is stored in a Snowflake repository, where we can see that the FHIR data is also securely encrypted by FHIR for backup and analytics purposes. Finally, we demonstrate the BDR interface, enabling users to directly access and generate reports from the FHIR repository using the FHIR-supplied API calls. BDR simplifies the process of constructing these FHIR API calls. Upon submitting the API call created by the BDR application, the user is required to enter a secure two-factor authentication code. Once the two-factor authentication is successful, the user gains access to the results of their FHIR request. These FHIR results can be downloaded to the user's device or ingested into another FHIR repository as needed. In summary, automating the ingestion of HL7, JSON, and healthcare management systems into a FHIR server using our automated graphical mapper significantly reduces the time required for FHIR implementations. This expeditious approach not only saves time but also surpasses manual methods, which can incur substantial costs. However, meticulous planning and careful consideration of relevant factors are essential to guarantee the precision and success of these processes. With the Beyond-FHIR application and our experienced teams, accuracy and efficiency are assured. Email us at beyond-ai-support@beyond-ai.net with all inquiries. Visit us at https://bdr-comply.com and www.beyond-ai.com.